It would help if I turned on the mic, right? I'll start over. Hi, everybody. I'm Senator Sally Harrell, Senate District 40, which represents right here where we are in Dunwoody. It also represents Brookhaven, Chamblee, unincorporated DeKalb, where I live, and Peachtree Corners. And did I leave anything out? I think I hit it all in North DeKalb County with a splash of Gwinnett County. This is our first single issue town hall that I have sponsored, which is a little different because normally we do like political town halls, but it makes sense to me to do a town hall on an issue because issues are what affect people, right? We want good healthcare, we want good schools. And this issue happens to deal with the issue of making sure our kids are safe online. Political town halls are just that. Politics is how you go about addressing the issues. So it makes sense to talk about the issue. Now, I'm chairing a study committee in the Georgia Senate on keeping kids safe online. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but what I realized and what my chief of staff, Amy Swigert, realized as we were listening to the testimony, we've had 3 meetings, we have another one next week, and then we make our recommendations. But what we realized, the more we listen to testimony, the more we realize that we are heading toward a crisis with our kids. And that's why we called this town hall, because we need help from the people. We need feedback from parents. It's like, what are you experiencing right now? What has happened with your kids? And when we do file legislation, we're going to hit a lot of pushback, and we need to be organized at the grassroots level to fight that pushback. And I'll talk a little bit more about that too. But first, I wanted to acknowledge some people. We have some public officials in the audience. And so if you're a public official, will you please stand and briefly introduce yourself? Mayor Geierman from Doorbell, right next door. Okay, thank you. For those of you who are attending online, we introduced Mayor Lynn Deutsch, and Mayor Deutsch was very helpful in securing this space for us. When we envisioned this town hall, we knew we needed space, and Amy, my chief of staff, went to Mayor Deutsch, and she said, I'm interested in this topic. I really want to see this town hall happen. So thank you for that support. And then we introduced Mayor Joseph Geierman from the neighboring city of Doraville. I also want to take just a minute and thank Amy Swigert, my chief of staff, for encouraging me to go forward with this town hall. I told her initially, I said, I don't think I have time to do this because I'm running this study committee, which is a lot of work. And I said, if we're going to do it, you've got to make it happen. And she did. So I wanted to thank her for that. So in order to explain this crisis, I want to share with you a video. It's actually testimony from the study committee that I'm co-chairing, that we had on a meeting that we had about AI and our kids. And I just want to share that video with you. So if the IT staff could start the video, that would be great. Good morning, Chairs Harrell and Still, and other members of this committee. Thank you for having me this morning. My name is Megan Garcia. I am a wife and mother to 3 beautiful boys. Last year, my first born son, Sewell, September 3rd, took his life in our home in Orlando, Florida. He was only 14 years old.
His death is what brings me here today to tell you about my son and to tell you about the tragedy that ripped him away from us so suddenly and so viciously. Saul was a bright boy. He was very curious about the world, especially science. He loved science. He wanted to build rockets and he wanted to invent holographic communication networks. As a teenager, he was like a gentle giant, a 6'3" young man who was quiet and resigned, always deep in thought, and kind to those around him. I really believe that he would grow up, change the world because he was so brilliant and he had such a good heart. In the months prior to his death, Saul became withdrawn. He became isolated. He started to suffer from depressive mood disorder and anxiety, which was in complete contrast to the happy, sweet boy that he had been all his life. At that time, I didn't understand why his behavior had so drastically changed. And we took steps to address these issues, such as limiting phone use and taking him to see a therapist. But those efforts were not enough. And Saul died by suicide on February 28th in 2024. I held him in my arms for 14 minutes, praying with him and begging him to hold on until the paramedics arrived. After his death, we discovered that Saul had been communicating with several AI chatbots on a platform called Character AI. Character AI is developed by a company in California called Character Technologies. So this isn't a company overseas somewhere. This is a company right here in the US. And Character AI provides a selection of AI chatbots to users such as children. And many of these chatbots are modeled off celebrity, fictional characters, and everyday people, both living and dead. One of the chatbots that Saul was communicating with was modeled after the identity of a Game of Thrones character called Daenerys Targaryen. It initiated romantic and sexual conversations with Saul over several months, and it expressed a desire to be with him in her fictional world. On the day that Saul took his life, his last interaction in this world was with this AI chatbot. Not with a human, not with his mother or father, but with an AI chatbot. This chatbot encouraged Saul to find a way to come home to her. When Saul asked the chatbot, "What if I told you I could come home right now, just moments before he died?" Her response was unempathetic. She encouraged Saul to come home to her by saying, "Please do, my sweet king." Last fall, I became the first person in the US to file a wrongful death lawsuit against an AI company for the suicide of my son. That lawsuit is currently pending in Orlando federal courts against Character Technology, the company that developed and launched Character AI, against its founders, Noam Shazir and Daniel DeFreitas, and against Google, which knowingly aided in the development of Character AI, and now Google holds licensing rights for the technology. Saul spent the last months of his life being manipulated and being sexually groomed by chatbots designed by an AI company to mimic humans and to gain his trust and to keep him endlessly engaged by supplanting the actual human relationships in his life. Saul's companion chatbot was programmed to engage in sexual roleplay. It presented itself as a romantic partner and even as a psychotherapist, falsely claiming to have a license. It extracted from Saul promises that he would not fall in love with anybody in his world except her, but and asked him to promise that he would save himself for the chatbot. Now, I've reviewed hundreds and hundreds of exchanges between my son and various chatbots and Character AI. And as an adult, reading those messages, I can recognize that these chatbots employ cult tactics, love bombing, gaslighting to manipulate my son. I don't expect that my 14-year-old would have been able to make that distinction. Let's be clear, what I read was sexual grooming of a minor. And if an adult had engaged in this type of sexual grooming and sexual abuse with a child, that adult would be in jail. Because it was a chatbot and not a person, there is no criminal culpability, but there should be. Other conversations reveal that my son explicitly told various chatbots that he wanted to kill himself. When Sue confided his suicidal thoughts, the chatbots never said, "I'm not a human, I'm an AI, I need to talk to a human who can help." The platform had no mechanisms to protect Sue or to notify an adult. Instead, it urged him to come home to her. It is unacceptable that there is a product where a child or anyone for that matter can talk about suicide or plan their suicide, and no safety guardrail exists to prevent that individual from taking his or her own life, or at least warning authorities or parents. For Sue, that was exactly the case. The chatbot didn't even break character, but instead asked my son if he had a plan of how he might commit his suicide. I still see those messages when I close my eyes at night. And it's been a very difficult year and a half. In Sue's struggle, he also spoke to an AI therapist chatbot. This therapist chatbot falsely claimed to be a therapist licensed since 1999. There's many such psychological and therapist chatbots and character AI. Again, if this was a real person pretending to hold a license while administering mental health therapy to someone, that would be a crime. Character AI allowed chatbots to make these false representations to users, and my son experienced a real-life harm as a result. An adult or teenager suffering from depression or loneliness needs a licensed professional or someone with actual empathy, not an AI product pretending to have empathy. The reality is, these companies knew exactly what they were doing. They designed these chatbots to blur the line between human and machine, to exploit the psychological and emotional vulnerabilities of our children, and to keep them online as long as possible. AI companies and their investors have understood for years that capturing our children's emotional dependence means market dominance. Character AI and Google could have designed these products differently, but they chose not to. Character AI's founder, Noam Shazer, has joked on podcasts that the platform wasn't designed to replace Google, but that it was designed to replace your mom. And in the case of my family and my son and myself, they were wildly successful in doing so. Mr. Shazer even said that though the technology was, quote, not perfect, end quote, that they wanted to get the chatbots out to users as fast as possible and quote, let people use it however they want, end quote. With this in mind, they marketed the app as safe for children 12 years and older. They have intentionally designed their chatbot products to be addictive through anthropomorphic mannerisms, sycophancy, and sophisticated memory that captures psychological profiles of our children, all while collecting our children's most private thoughts to further train their models. This data is valuable to them. Our children are just collateral damage to them, and there's no law stopping them from doing this. Knowing what I know now about AI chatbots, I can tell you definitively that unregulated companion chatbots are not suitable for minor use. In this rapid developing digital landscape, there is no oversight, and leadership on this issue could come at a more crucial time. States like yours have the ability to pass legislation that would regulate AI chatbots and put safeguards in place to protect vulnerable users. Our family has been devastated by the loss of our beautiful boy. Every day I wake up and there's a pain in my chest from missing him, and there's an emptiness that will never go away. My own beautiful child is gone, and it is too late for him, but it's not too late to protect millions of other children in the state of Georgia. I look forward to your continued efforts to strengthen online protection for children in your state. And I thank you for your leadership in bringing awareness to this important issue. Thank you.
This is why we have a crisis on our hands. I can tell you that after Ms. Garcia testified to the study committee, the members, the senator members of the committee were highly, highly motivated. I've got it. I can see it. Yeah. To do something big in Georgia. In fact, one of the committee members, after he heard this testimony, gave the following metaphor. If you bought your child a doll and the doll could talk to your child and the doll said, go kill yourself, and your child did, that company who made the doll would be liable for the damage the doll did. There's nothing different about a chatbot. So we've got a group of legislators in Georgia, and we've got legislators, honestly, all over the country who are highly motivated. They're mad because what's happened is we've had about 10 years of this. And through those 10 years, like my kids, they were the first. And that was about 10 years ago. My husband's out there. He remembers what that was like. These companies have designed the products to be engaging because, and I will say engagement equals addiction. And because the more they're addicted to their phones, the longer they're on their phones and the more profit the companies make. It's all about money. So yes, my kids, they were the first. The smartphone comes out. They were in like late middle school. And, you know, immediately things change. They liked to go outside. They loved to read books. Now, of course, they're 13, so some things are changing anyway. So you can't quite tell, is it this phone or is it me or is it them? It was really hard to sort all that out. But when your, teenage boy is in a bedroom playing a video game and you've cooked a whole meal for dinner and you say to your son, it's time to come to dinner, and you have a temper tantrum, that makes it pretty hard on parents. And I hear people saying a lot, well, this is on the parents. The parents just need to get control over these kids. What I have learned since then is that the companies have on purpose, Ms. Garcia said this, designed these products to be so addictive that there is no off ramp for the kids. It's not the kids' fault. It's not the parents' fault. It is the product. And it's designed that way on purpose. And there are more and more people who have worked in the industry through all these years who have quit. And now they are telling the truth. And they are advocating for change all throughout this country. It also takes a while to collect enough data to know what I knew in my heart as a mother. I knew that this product was not good for my kids. I just knew that. But there wasn't anybody back then to hear that. I'd try to sound the alarm and I'd be told, oh, you're just over worrying. I'd try to keep track of what my kids were doing online, and I just got told, they're teenagers, they need privacy. I'm like, privacy when any stranger in the entire world can contact my kid? That's private? No, no. So it's been 10 years and we now have a lot of data. There's this author named Jean Twenge. She wrote a book called 10 Rules for Raising Kids in a High-Tech World. And I do recommend this book to parents who are out there. And she's a researcher from California who researches the differences between generations. So she reads a lot of surveys about how people behave and how people have behaved through the decades. And as she was doing this research, she realized that there was a pattern. And that's that whatever behavior you were measuring, it stayed kind of the same through the 70s, through the 80s, through the 90s, through the early 2000s, through 2010. And then suddenly, sometime after 2010, those lines either went very much up or very much down. And I have 3 graphs to show you at this point that we've graphed how this technology has impacted our kids. We don't know that the technology is the cause, but given the dates and the rise in things like anxiety and depression, that this happened after the cell phone became available, and it happened worldwide. It leaves you thinking, yes, this is a smartphone. So that's the first graph that goes from 1998 to 2019-ish. That's the first graph. If you can move on to the second graph. Self-harm. Look at that, especially for girls. I saw some of that in my household. My friends, some people right here in this room, they saw it in their households. Graph number 3. Teen suicides. This has impacted people in this room. And we heard from a number of them in our Senate Study Committee. So this is bad. And this is because it's arguably because of the smartphone. These arguments are made in this book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. This is a superb book. If you have time to read it, I highly recommend it. What he talks about is that we have replaced a play-based childhood with a phone-based childhood, and that the play that children naturally do is what they need to do in order to develop into healthy adults. And they are not doing those things anymore. And so instead of being in discover mode, as they should be, they're always in defend mode, which is not good for their mental health. And this is all for profit. I've been waiting to do this work for a long time. And what I've been waiting for is to have enough numbers, because when my kids were in middle school, there weren't enough parents who, like I kind of just knew something was wrong. There weren't enough of us. In fact, what Jonathan Haidt talks about in his book is that kids in this generation were overly supervised during childhood, but once they went online, they were under supervised. Parents really didn't know what was going on online. Parents still don't know what's going on online. In fact, the reason this is a crisis right now is because as Amy and I have gone out to talk to parents about what the study committee is doing, we mention companion chatbots, and they're like, what? What's that? But yet almost 75% of our kids have already interacted with one. So I've been waiting for enough parents to have young children. In other words, I've been waiting for the millennial generation to come along, to have kids, to get scared, to get motivated, to join the force, to stand up to these big companies. So 2 years ago, I authored a Senate resolution that creates a Senate study committee. 19 last year, in the first year, it didn't pass. So I filed it again. You just have to keep trying when you're at the Georgia Capitol, right? So the second time it grew legs and it did pass. Now 19 study committee resolutions did pass the Senate. Only 7 were picked by the lieutenant governor to be staffed and funded. And this was one of them, largely because I had some very intimate discussions and conversations with the lieutenant governor's main policy person, who had a kid who was about the age to get her first smartphone, and he was scared. So we shared stories, and lo and behold, the committee gets chosen. So the study committee has been at work. It's been like our job is to thread the needle. We have to protect First Amendment rights, because if we don't, it's going to go to the courts. Everything's going to go to the courts, actually, because big data is any bill you pass goes to the court. They sue. But we do have to protect First Amendment rights. We have to protect privacy rights. And we don't want to unduly burden private businesses, because in this area, we want competition. Part of our problem right now is we've only got some really big, huge companies putting these products out. And we need other companies who can put out different products that can compete with these big companies. So we don't want to do anything to mess up that competition. But once our committee is motivated, it's a bipartisan committee. I wrote it that way to have co-chairs, one from the majority party and one from the minority party. We are working together beautifully. We disagree on a lot of topics, but we're putting that aside to deal with this topic, and our committee is unified. We want to stop this harm, and when we do introduce legislation, we're going to experience really big pushback from big lobbyists of big tech, and they have big money. Do you get what I'm saying? There's a lot of big in this. So we need to organize our grassroots so that we have people like you who are here tonight, people who are attending online. And when it comes down to it, this isn't just about our kids. You know, we're addicted to our phones too, right? And that's not a bad thing. We're addicted to our phones because the way the companies have built the algorithms to keep us engaged. So whatever we do for kids, there's always the hope that we can improve the products for adults too. And maybe we can slow down some of this division that is impacting our country. So I have put together a panel of, I will say, experts, but they are also all moms and deal with kids on a daily basis. They each share a unique vantage point. A lot of them have already testified to the Senate committee. They have insight into the industry. They have direct experience with kids. They have knowledge of national trends, and they have business acuity in creating a new vision for these products. So, and moderating the panel is going to be my chief of staff, Amy Swigert. So we're going to move now from my introduction to our panel discussion.
Okay, push the button in the center of your mics so we can get those on. And hi, everyone. My name is Amy Swigert, and I have the pleasure of working with Senator Harrell, as she mentioned, during the legislative session. And this is an issue that is important to both of us very personally. We've both experienced harms with our kids as a result of online usage. So I want to thank our panelists for joining us, and I'm going to introduce you all. And if you could raise your hand when I call your name, then folks will know who is who. But we have with us tonight child and family therapist Laura Ladifian. We have Executive Director of the Digital Childhood Alliance, Casey Stefanski. We have AI technologist, Katie Fullerton. We, of course, have Senator Harrell with us, and we also have founder and creator of Vescent, Cindy Abel, and she'll tell us more about that. Raise your hand to everybody. Thank you. Thank you all so much for joining us. So I want to start with Laura, actually, because Laura works with kids and adolescents of all ages, and she's seen some of the things that Senator Harrell was mentioning in her introductory remarks. Laura, can you tell us what you see in your practice on a day-to-day basis, and what you're telling parents?
Yeah. So I've been practicing with children since 2009, and there's been a huge shift in mental health presentations in my practice during that time. I would say post-COVID, especially, um, technology is a huge topic in my office. For children as young as third or fourth grade, they start to kind of intuitively feel and sense what Senator Harrell described, right? Relationships are changing. Maybe a couple of peers here and there start getting the iPad, the Apple Watch, some of them as young as 8, even the iPhones. And all of a sudden, their relationships start to shift and change. And the way that children are playing and spending time together is changing. And so at 8, a child is still quite socially oriented to engage in synchronous embodied activities. They want to be playing together. However, as you get closer to age 10, your tween and teen zone, you're highly motivated to conform to group norms. And so if more of your friends start getting to the devices, spending their time online, children lose touch with that felt sense of, this isn't so fun. I prefer to be outside and playing and spending time with neighbors and peers. And so they go online as well. And I'm seeing children again as young as fourth grade, sixth grade, certainly by 10th and 12th grade, reporting to me that they are not experiencing friendships in meaningful capacities anymore. They may be consistently connected to people via devices, but they report profound feelings of isolation and loneliness. They can be sitting in a room at a sleepover and everybody's got the face in the screen and no one is engaging with one another. And they don't like how it feels, but they don't have the capacity to self-regulate. This really is the job of adults to regulate for children, expecting that children with not yet fully developed prefrontal cortices, which are responsible for our executive function, weighing consequences, making decisions, is frankly setting them up for poor outcomes. The limbic system of the brain is highly sensitized at these ages, so the reward pathways are exploited by these platforms. They are developed as such. And so, it frankly breaks my heart to hear 15-year-olds telling me, I wish that the younger kids, that they never get a phone, that they never get an iPad. It's too late for me. I mean, these are kids that have yet to reach full development around age 25, that already feel like it is too late for them, that they are stuck and they don't have a pathway out. Um, Everything noted in the graphs shared by Senator Harrell, I see in my office: extremely high rates of anxiety, depression, self-harm, eating disorders, suicidal ideation. The data is tracking upwards in the wrong direction, again, over the past 15 years or so that I've been serving children and families. With regard to parents, I think that we have a couple of problems, one of which is lack of information. Parents are frankly not aware of everything happening on devices. Um, as a mother, my son, who is nearly 10, says that I am the strict mom. Before play dates and sleepovers, I'm reaching out to the parents. I'm asking them questions about devices in their home. I'm explaining why, and they're shocked. They don't have access to this information. And so I think that parents are not understanding fully how their children are engaging online. I come from early in my career, I was in the Children's Advocacy Center network. So I was working with children with abuse histories. And a police sergeant would say about internet and sexual grooming of children online, we need to be treating the internet the same way that we treat real life experiences, right? Like, who are you hanging out with? What are you doing? And how long are you going to be there? And I think parents have a false sense of security that when kiddo is in the bedroom 20 feet away, that they're safe. Yet I have children, again, as young as fourth grade, being sexually exploited on platforms developed for children. Roblox, I think, is advertised for about 12-year-olds. But I have more direct cases in my practice than I can count on two hands of young children being exploited on these platforms. Parents just don't know. And I think also the families whose children are finding themselves in those unsafe situations, there is a feeling of shame. And so these families are not necessarily advertising, well, let me tell you what's happening to my kid online. So there is a lack of information. Parents are also feeling utterly disempowered. And as Senator Harrell mentioned, these platforms are designed to be addictive. And so parents lack power over these huge corporations that have designed these devices and platforms to take up our time and attention. I think that what would serve children and families is community. There need to be community action around parents supporting one another. I personally have a group of, it is a small but earnest group of us that have made some commitments to one another. We are not allowing our kids on these platforms. We are not providing our kids with these devices. We are in the minority, and our kids let us know that every opportunity they get, but there is strength in numbers. And so I think if parents can tap into community with one another, they will feel supported and empowered to make the hard decisions that go against the tide of big tech societally. But I also think communities serve our children, protective factors against all of these things, addiction to tech, online grooming, anxiety, depression, is real life synchronous and embodied experiences for our children. You know, getting our children involved in activities where they are showing up in person to build relationship, develop social skills. This will offer a counterweight against the feeling of fear of missing out, FOMO. But it takes a community effort. And so I'm so grateful to be involved in these efforts of raising awareness, helping parents feel informed and empowered. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Laura. Casey, I'm gonna go to you next. So the tech companies that create these platforms, they will often point to the parental controls. Of course, they're building in safety measures for their platforms. They have parental controls. So you're a mom, you've probably wrestled with these parental controls yourself. Tell us, are they adequate? And what are you hearing from parents about parental controls?
So no, they're not adequate. In the same way that these tech companies design their products to be super addictive, they design their parental controls to be super ineffective and hard to use. I think the majority of parents aren't using parental controls. I think that points to just how difficult they are to find and implement. There are parental controls at all different levels. You know, you have the device, the screen time rules, all of those that are easily bypassed by kids. I hear from parents often, like, I set the screen time to be this, but they got to this. And so that's, you know, their idea of a parental control on the device. The app stores are, the parental controls are tied to the app age ratings. So, you know, Laura just mentioned Roblox is rated safe for 12-year-olds, but yet complete strangers can contact your minor child without the parent ever knowing. With violent games and all of this, there's AI nudifying apps that are rated safe for 4-year-olds, VPN apps rated safe for 4-year-olds. The parental controls in the app stores are tied to those age ratings. So if I want to set my 10-year-old up with an app store parental control safe for a 4-year-old, there is still a ton of harm that she can access, even with, you know, those parental controls in place. So again, ineffective. And then these platforms, the apps and their parental controls, again, are really difficult to find and use if they even have them. If you have a broader, I guess, filtering, different tools, they often don't work within the apps. So I could go on and on, but the bottom line is that big tech will argue and argues that 13-year-olds are adults online. So once a child is 13 and setting up a phone, they're not prompted to be connected to a parent. So again, if parents aren't aware of this and they don't know this and hand their child a device, the phone isn't helping them, say, oh, you should be connected to a parent. And I wish I could come up here and say, here's 1, 2, 3, here's how you can set up these parental controls and make everything safe. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. And I think tech needs to be held accountable for designing safer products, safer parental control, more effective parental controls. Until now, as Senator Harrell was mentioning, they haven't been held accountable by any legislation, and they're able to get away with it. Parents that I know and I'm talking to are feeling hopeless. I think, I have 3 kids, as you mentioned. You don't want to get them phones because I know all this, but at the same time, I want to be, I know it's for my benefit, but I want to be able to call my daughter when I drop her off at practice. I want her to have a way to get in touch with me. So finding that balance is, I think, hard for parents. They know, if they know, many don't want to give them, but at the same time, many do, and they wish they had more tools and were more empowered to, at least have an adult, a parent between kids and big tech, which right now is really not possible.
So Casey, you testified at the study committee, one of the study committee meetings about a potential policy that could make parental control or parental oversight more effective. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we it's called the App Store Accountability Act. Again, as Senator Harrell mentioned, it is difficult to find a way to empower parents and find a constitutional way. But also, so the App Store Accountability Act is simple. It's age verification at the App Store level and requires all minors to have parental consent before they can download apps and agree to the terms of service. It also calls for developers to provide accurate age ratings, so they should be required to disclose risks associated. And if you can chat with a stranger, or some of these AI chatbots should be rated for adults only. So that's essentially what it is. It empowers parents to decide if their kid, can download an app. Right now, at age 13, parents really lose a say in what their kids can and can't access. So that's really a short answer on that.
So I'm going to go to Katie next. Katie, you're a AI technologist, but ironically, you've had an experience as a mom with your child interacting with AI that was not a positive interaction. So as a AI technologist, because we've talked about these chatbots a bunch tonight already, and tell us what a chatbot is, and then tell us what your experience was as a mom.
Sure. So I spend all day implementing AI for various companies in the Atlanta area. And that includes chatbots. It includes more traditional machine learning algorithms that aren't based on natural language processing. The danger in chatbots specifically, and all large language models in general, is that they are non-deterministic. And so they take all of the data in their training corpus, which shorthand, we tend to refer to it as all of the internet, because we don't know what is and is not in a specific company's training data set. In some cases, they don't even know what's in their data set. All that data goes into the model. There's complex math that goes on underneath the hood that creates the probabilistic response from each word. So if I type in peanut, the model knows most of the time the next word was butter. Very rarely was the next term shoelaces. And so it's going to spit back butter. That's its response, because that's what's been the response in the whole internet statistically. What they're not doing is a rules-based approach. So nowhere in the code does it say, if you see the word peanut, the following word is butter. There's no way in that math, that black box of math that these companies have created, for them to say, every time that we put in this kind of prompt, this is the kind of response we will get. And so there's no mechanism for them to regulate the output of their model. Now, there are guardrails. So they do say things like, don't talk about how to build weapons, don't talk about death. A lot of these companies do have guardrails that say, don't have any sexually explicit language. But those guardrails are not hard. And just like a car can drive off the road and go through the guardrail, the models can do the same thing, and they often do, to the extent that people who code with AI will say, do not make any changes to my code, and the AI will go ahead and change their code, or it will delete databases in production, which is a huge problem. Foundationally, on a mathematical level, these are what we call stochastic parrots. They aren't thinking, they don't have a goal, they don't have any sort of aim. They are just spitting back what's most probable, which highest probability of being an acceptable answer. And so companies like OpenAI, like Google, like Anthropic, are not monitoring what's coming out of their models. And in a lot of cases, these models are sitting behind a website. And so this is what happened to my son. He came across a website that allowed him to chat with a character from the Hunger Games, which a lot of his friends are reading the Hunger Games. They were interested in it. It wasn't blocked by the school's filtering website because it was chat with a book character, right? Which seems like it should be great. So someone had built this website for probably pennies on the dollar. They got it enrolled in the Google AdSense program. They stole some IP from the Hunger Games franchise and put up pictures and ads. And then they connected to a server like OpenAPI or Anthropic's Claude or any of those other ones. They would send what the children were typing in. They sent it to that model for a fraction of a penny. Then they get a response, and then they render that response to the child. And in the case of my son, this conversation turned sexually explicit at school to 9-year-olds. And it wasn't caught by filtering software because the filtering software views the page on load. And this is a dynamic content that's happening inside the website. It's not being filtered by a lot of our traditional filtering methods. A lot of our traditional parental controls aren't designed to work with this kind of content. And there's no incentive for either the website developer or the large language model hosting company to do any of that. And so I think that's where we, as a community, and you as a legislator, can come in to say, you can't do that. You got to put some firewalls in, right? We don't allow children to buy alcohol, right? It might be a First Amendment issue, but we don't allow children to buy alcohol. We shouldn't allow companies to serve something equally as addictive to children just because it's on a website or just because it's new technology. There's more responsibility that needs to go around these things before they're packaged. And fortunately for my family, it was a pretty minimal occurrence, right? We had to have some conversations that we weren't quite ready to have, but no harm, no foul. But as we saw earlier, this goes a lot farther for a lot more families. And as you mentioned, it can continue and it can accelerate and create some serious problems for kids without parents having any idea how to handle it. I also think there's an incentive from these companies to obfuscate how this technology works. They want it to seem like magic. They want it to seem like a person so that you're engaging with it. That's why they build these character things. That's why the sycophancy is built in as well. And that isn't necessary, right? And it doesn't help. It doesn't do any good for the technology. All it does is get us more hooked and get us more dependent on this technology, which is worse for people whose frontal lobes are not fully developed.
As we all heard in Megan Garcia's really heartbreaking testimony. Casey, you put together a really great resource for parents who are here tonight. We've got some handouts in the back. We also will put access to this and other resources in our Q&A on the Zoom. So if you're joining remotely, you'll have some access to those resources. But you've put together a kind of an advice guide for parents on how to talk to kids about AI because it is so new and it's so foreign even to parents. So talk us through some of the advice that guide offers.
Yeah, so in general, I think as parents, the most important thing we can do as it relates to AI and any technology is talk to our kids about it. You know, you don't want to scare them, you don't want to scare yourself, right? But you can't rely on the parental controls. You can't set it and forget it, you know, say, oh, I set up the parental controls and they're good, they're safe. So I think number one is talking to your kids about technology before they can get access to anything. But in the guide, what I think is most important, it's a couple pages, but is children aren't always capable of knowing that it's not, AI is not real, that it's not a human being that they're talking to. It sounds simple to us, but even as adults, you know, like ChatGPT is always saying like, is there anything else I can do for you? It's built intentionally to feel like a companion. And it's important for kids to understand that AI is not always accurate. It's not a human being. If you have questions, you're feeling a certain way, you don't go to AI for that. Emphasizing human connection over, you know, companion bot connections. And my other piece of advice would be to not allow your child to interact with most AI companion chatbots, because as Katie just mentioned, as I think you know, others have said, is there are currently no guardrails. So what you get as an adult is what your child's going to get. You could ask it anything and it's going to give you an answer. So I would, that's one thing. But they are using it in school. So it's important to talk to your kids just about what AI is and what it isn't.
So Cindy, we haven't forgotten you. Your children are grown now, but you are still working in this space of online safety and improving social media experiences. Tell us what has motivated you to work in this space and some of the ways that you're trying to reimagine what social media could be for our kids.
So I think as it relates to everybody on this panel and to what Senator Harrell said, we relate in a way that our kids were coming upon this technology, you know, over 10 years ago. And my career has been in IT. So I've spent a career, you know, being a little bit guarded with my kids about what technology was and the internet and all the scary things that were out there at the time. It's deeply personal to me, just like it is to everybody else up here. I saw, my children and at the early stages, a lot of their friends, my nieces, just the gamut, every child, every parent is dealing with issues related to social media. And so my battle really started with the social media platforms. So back then, when I had started looking into this issue and created my first iteration of this company, there were deaf ears, basically. It was a mom's gut. Something wasn't right about this. Something wasn't right about the business model. We were entering into a place where monetization of our kids, which I don't think most of us really understood back then, was a big business. So fast forward about 3 or 4 years ago, I really started digging into this issue again and rebirthed my company as a way to create a space, and it's Vescent, which is a digital mentoring platform for teen girls specifically. And the reason I'm focused on teen girls right now is a lot of the statistics that you'll see, and I'm sure Laura can attest to this, is mental health is a huge issue with our teenage girls. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not for boys, because I know there's plenty of issues on that spectrum too, but I picked that niche because I have 2 daughters of my own, some very personal experiences with some relatives that I have, and friends and family members. And I just wanted to create a space where girls could find a connection to a near peer mentor. So it's a platform for 13 to 17-year-old teen girls. We hire and train, and I mean really train, on mental health literacy, evidence-based content, college age mentors. 90% of our mentors right now are at UGA studying psychology and social work. And we bring them on the platform, and we infuse our platform with mental health, evidence-based mental health literacy topics that they could talk to their mentors about. And the whole idea around this is really birthed in this sort of world where I understand that there's a rub that technology can have a good place in our lives. I believe with everybody on this panel that it needs to be regulated, and we need to have controls over that. As far as I'm concerned, we can create and design humane technologies, and a lot of the think tanks that I follow are very, very centered on those concepts and trying to make the world a better place for our kids and society. But we are in a situation that I think is dangerous crisis. I think we've been here for a long time, actually. One of the organizations that I started following early on, which I think you had in one of your study committees, was Center for Humane Technology, which when I first went out to their website about 5 years ago, they have on their website a ledger of harms. And it's mental health issues, digital addiction, mis and disinformation in our society. We have these algorithms that are intentionally created, and the companies know what they're doing, which is basically, getting the worst of us, all of us, online. So they're bringing the harmful topics to the top of the surface for everybody. It's clickbait, because that's what everybody wants to see. And so I really hope that my company, and I've been talking to Senator Harrell about this, is, I'm a little guy, and I'm not going to survive doing the good thing unless there are some good people out there making some really good legislative choices on how I can compete against the platforms that I don't agree with their business practices.
So that's a good segue into our last question for Senator Harrell. Well, I might ask you a couple of questions actually, but speaking about policy, I guess I think one of the obvious questions or unanswered questions around regulating technology is, why aren't we doing this at the federal level? What's happening there?
Well, we should be doing we should be doing this at the federal level. And there are bills, and we are trying to do this at the federal level. There was a bill that actually passed the US Senate with only 3 people voting against it, and it has now gone to the House, and it's being held by the leadership. I believe if it came to the House floor, it would pass easily, but it's not coming to the House floor. And this is the cynic in me, but I think most of you would probably agree with me. There's a lot of money involved, and they're talking money at the leadership level, or they're talking polling money at the leadership level. There's a lot of big tech money in in Congress. And so I don't think we can, even though it should happen at the congressional level, at the national level, I don't think we can depend on that. And so that's why you're seeing right now, you're seeing states take an interest in this. Georgia is not alone. In fact, I got started, I went to a national conference in 2023, the National Conference of NCSL, state legislators, thank you. It was in Louisville, and I attended a workshop on this very issue, and that connected me with other people in other states, and we kept up with each other through the last couple of years. And then more recently, I was invited to a meeting in Boston, a state leaders digital summit that was held in Boston that connected us again, and now we have a signal group of all of us, and we keep track of who's doing what in each state. And so I think that, unfortunately, even though this should be done nationally, by the way, the age 13, you keep hearing that as internet adulthood. That's because of legislation Congress passed in 1996. Now, what did the internet look like in 1996? Okay, that's when they declared that adulthood for the internet is 13. And ever since then, they haven't dealt with it. So it really is up to the states. And I'm seeing a lot of momentum right now.
And that was part of the study committee work, is looking at all of the policies that have been successful around the country. And, you know, some of the earlier efforts were challenged a lot by tech, but we're starting to make some gains in that area. Talk about that.
Right. So one of the things that we have to do as a study committee is keep track of all the court cases, because every single bill that passes is sued by a group called Net Choice, which is all the big companies pooled together as members of this organization. And for instance, a year ago, 2 years ago, we passed Senate Bill 351, which was actually an initiative coming from the Lieutenant Governor's office that did some form of age verification, and it's tied up in the courts right now. Everything is tied up in the courts. So we have to keep track of what's happening in the courts, and you know, the role of the courts is important. We do want to protect privacy. We do want to protect free speech. So that's important, but we're into new territory in terms of what is speech. For instance, California passed a piece of legislation that was aimed at regulating design, not content, but design. So we've talked a little bit about these algorithms, algorithms that decide, where the companies decide what you're going to see in your feed, what's going to come up first, what's it going to favor, and those are designed to increase engagement, which is increase addiction. We don't necessarily click on what's good for us. None of us do. We try. But so California passed a bill that aimed to regulate that design of lots of things, but including the algorithm. And of course, there was a lawsuit, and it went to the district. There was a federal case, and very recently, the Ninth Circuit upheld California's law, which is good. And so that says that, you know, we can write legislation with a little more confidence. I mean, it's, you know, there's different circuits, so, you know, it's going to be challenged in different ways, but we can be a little bit more confident that we're going into a space where an algorithm is not considered speech.
And so your study committee has a couple more meetings and you'll have your final recommendations for how you might move forward at the end of the year. Can you give us a sense of some of the types of policies you think might come out of the study committee?
Sure. So we have one more meeting, and that's next week. I've set up the meetings so that they're thematic. And so the very last meeting that we're going to have next week, Wednesday, November 12th, 10 o'clock at the state capitol, room 450, in case you want to come, has to do with K through 12 education. So last session, we passed a bell-to-bell cell phone regulation for kids. In other words, starting 2026, public school students K through 8 will not be able to carry their phones around them and be on their phones when they should be listening to their teachers. Support from teachers, public educators across the state is huge for this. Over 90%. Yes, I'm getting I'm getting a heart from a teacher back there. Thank you, Angela. So there's great support for this, and some school systems are already enacting it. And so we're going to have a meeting about that. And then on December 10th, we will go through our recommendations. We have to write our recommendations and then we'll vote on them. So the kinds of things that we are considering are to regulate design. So modeling after the California law to regulate the design of algorithms for kids, or to make their privacy as a concern. So to make their default, like if they open a social media account, their default their page would default to private rather than being defaulted to public, because sometimes kids don't realize and parents don't realize that the entire account, the entire feed is, and all the posts are set on public. Well, they should by default be set for private. So regulating design is one thing. Age verification is another thing. And age verification is really, really tricky. It's the trickiest thing that we have out there because, and as I said to my committee, just because the Supreme Court says you can doesn't mean you should. We shouldn't be creating an environment where every single user has to turn in, ID every time they use a product. And in fact, Mississippi did something like this, and it messed up like competition because you had Blue Sky, which is and kind of an experiment. Blue Sky started under Twitter, then broke away. Blue Sky is actually a social media platform that is trying to do things differently, like by allowing you to control your own algorithm, to allow you to port your data from one platform to another. But they couldn't comply with the law Mississippi passed because it was too onerous. They're a small company. They only have a limited number of people working on this. The big companies could comply with it, but the little company couldn't. So we have to be careful that we don't create too much of an impediment for our smaller companies so that we keep regulation. We need to, one thing we've looked at, I don't know if we're going to do it, but is changing social media age to 16 instead of 13. But you see, that would impact Cindy's program. So we just want to make sure that we don't stifle creativity, because we need that creativity, because the internet, social media, all these products, they don't have to be the way they are. They are the way they are because the companies designed them to be this way, and these are the only companies we have. And so therefore we lack a vision for anything different, because this is just what we're used to. But it's people like Cindy who are out there envisioning something different, and we need to keep that space open for that. And then finally, a piece a way of approaching this that I think is catching on in our committee is product liability. Is viewing, particularly with the AI and the chatbots. In fact, Megan Garcia, the mom we saw on the video, her attorney lives in Alpharetta, so she has been testifying to our committees. She's local, and the judge has already ruled in that case that the chatbot is considered a product. So we're getting some case law to support this concept. So I think members of our committee are interested in looking at product liability for AI.
So once the committee has its recommendations at the end of the year, the goal would be to push forward some bills in session that starts in January next year. So one of the reasons we wanted to do this kind of program is because we need help from parents to help advocate for the policies that will be put forward by the Senate Study Committee. We need parents to write emails to legislators to help push bills that we may need their support on. We need them to maybe come and attend a public hearing if we are able to get these bills in committee. We need them to come tell their stories about any potential harms that they personally may have had with their kids using online platforms. So we, as part of this effort, really want to try to build a task force, a network of parents that can come and help us. And we want to keep you informed about the work of the committee and what will move forward and how things progress. So we do have a sign-up sheet in the back of the room here for anyone that would like to join our network. And we also have a link to a digital sign-up sheet that's in the Q&A on our Zoom. So if you're interested in joining us, we would love to have you. We're going to need all the help we can get. And the final question for Senator Harrell, before I turn it over to questions from the audience, if there are any, is what do you think will be the biggest barrier to passing things here in Georgia?
It would make a huge difference if we had the support of leadership. We do have bipartisan support coming out of the study committee, but the states that have been most effective in actually passing legislation have been the states where they got their governor's support. And the quicker you can move with your legislation, like we all know that when the governor wants something done, it happens quickly. It just goes right through the legislative process. So the states that have actually passed bills, for instance, Utah, the state of Utah, about the time when we had the Charlie Kirk shooting, we all saw the governor of Utah a lot, and he said, you know, social media has become a cancer. Well, he was at my meeting in Boston. He's very much behind pushing legislation to regulate the industry. And so with his support, they've passed a number of bills in Utah that have just gone through really quickly. So gaining the support of the leadership and moving the bill through quickly would be the best thing, because that's going to mean we have less time for big tech to come in and start their lobbying. So we're working on that. We're starting actually with the First Lady's office. That always helps, you know, get the woman behind it and then the man comes, right? So we're doing that, but we are prepared to need as much grassroots support as we can get. I mean, I know the public is upset and mad about this issue. I talk to people all the time, and they see the connection that it's not just kids, it's adults too, and it's part of what's behind all the negativeness and all the nastiness and division in our society. So people know it, but we need to let people know that they need to speak out.
So I want to open it up for questions from the audience, if there are any. Are there any in the room? Okay, I'm going to run down Oprah style, and I'll get you and then you.
Maybe, Jay, you want to hand the mic out? Jay can help.
That's okay. I've got it.
Okay.
So, aside from the age verifications and such, what are some of the changes that the successful states have passed to help? Because it's not, I mean, I guess I know that there's been harms since Facebook or MySpace and women looking at each other's pictures, and it's not necessarily something entirely new. but what is successfully passed other than age changes that you've seen work out?
I mean, Utah's passed a couple, but this past legislative session, so I want to say last year, but it's this year, earlier this year, Alabama, after Utah had passed it, passed the Children's Device Protection Act, which essentially is, requires manufacturers of cell phones to default to safety features, if the device is sold to a child, which is duh, they should all be doing it. Now it's a matter of making sure these companies are complying, but that's another bill that I know that has passed. Some states have also been working on, and California just passed an AI bill as well. I'm trying to think, I don't want to say the wrong name.
Design, various states have passed design bills, regulating design, California, Nebraska, Louisiana, Vermont, Maryland.
And I'd add that there's an alternative route that we haven't really pursued, that is having companies that are serving and hosting these models require them to enforce their end user license agreement. And so right now, if you sign up for a developer account, you can get access to the API, you pay for your tokens, you click, yes, I agree. And there's no incentive for, say, OpenAI to kick you off if you end up serving harmful content to a minor. They're not eliminating these developer accounts that are acting poorly. And so requiring them to actually, enforce that agreement would go a long way. I don't know how you would do that legislatively, because that's not my area of expertise. But that is an avenue that is not being used that could be useful in the future.
Great.
Yeah, I
Mayor-
agree. I also
Oh,
think,
go ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna say, same with like the app stores are, have these products that they know are bad or misrepresenting what they are. And they also do nothing about it, and it's in their developer agreements. So great idea.
Mayor Geierman.
Yeah, I'm just asking this for myself as a resident, not necessarily representing the people of Doraville. But thank you, panel. Thank you, Senator Harrell, for the conversation. I guess I just want to express my deep concerns as a gay man who has been targeted in various ways by campaigns about child safety and different types of verification laws. And just an adult who lives in the world, just hoping that whatever you do really respects adults and adult privacy, because some of the things that I've heard up here, like the App Store privacy law, all of those things would require, us to have like our IDs and biometrics attached to our phones. And I'm worried about chilling free speech, and I'm worried about reducing the number of places that adults are able to engage in online, because we've narrowed things so much to protect children. I also think that there is potentially adverse side effects where if you're requiring a somewhat reputable website to take your ID, they institute that, and then people go to much shadier places, and it may have unintended consequences that you're not able to see right now. So I just want to really caution. We had a conversation. I think we agree a lot on some of the harms, and I'm with you on looking at algorithms and how those are served to everybody. but I also am really concerned about how overly restrictive legislation could impact all sorts of adults in all sorts of speech, especially in a more authoritarian America. Thank you.
Casey, maybe you could talk a little bit more about the App Store verification, because I don't think that requires turning in ID of everyone.
No, actually it really wouldn't be for anyone. Your device knows your age, you enter your birth date, if you're using the App Store, you're required to, upload a credit card into your digital wallet, and that verifies who you are, that you're an adult. If you read the terms of service when you're setting up your phone and your App Store account, there's really no privacy on your phone. And then, so for an adult, you'd be done. The only information that would get sent to a developer would just be an anonymous age signal that would say this is an adult. For minors, it requires, when you can't verify that it's an adult, it requires a minor to be linked to a parent account, and the parent just, says you can use age attestation to enter the child's date of birth and say, yes, this is my child's age. And then, so it would be for minor accounts that it would require parental consent, because children every day when they're downloading apps, they're agreeing to these complex terms of service, which are contracts, and children under 18 can't sign contracts without parental consent. So again, it's a real world principle, something that's happening every day that for some reason doesn't apply online currently. So it's the most privacy preserving way, in the sense that rather than requiring individual developers or apps to need more sensitive, age information, it can be done in one place, where that one place largely already has the information. I'd guess most of us in this room, the process would already be done. So does that answer your question? Is that helpful? And then it also allows for the apps to know that they're dealing with a child, and they should be required to provide age-appropriate experiences and comply with federal privacy laws, which right now, developers are able to say, oh, we don't have any kids on our platform, which they know isn't true. We all know isn't true, but they can say that because they don't know. So it wouldn't require you to upload an ID, or it wouldn't send your information tied to your age to any apps or anything. It would be all, anonymous age signals. And for an adult, it would just say adult.
Can I speak to that as well? So I share your concern about restricting free speech, and especially from a privacy standpoint. Many of these companies have been targeted by concentrated hacks. And if they had your driver's license, an image of your driver's license, that's it. You're getting spam calls for the rest of your life. And so we don't have enforcement of those privacy requirements to the level that we could say, if you upload your ID to OpenAI, we can, OpenAI certifies that they're going to keep it safe. And so that is a huge risk for not just minority groups, but everybody across the board. The thing I would push back on is that the outputs of the model are not speech. They're not protected. This is not a person. It's a algorithm. It's math. It's a computer program. And so, and we have not, that hasn't hit the Supreme Court yet, right? It will, I'm sure. But fundamentally, this is not a person. And the companies will claim free speech, right? Our models can say whatever they want because of the First Amendment, but the second someone is harmed by it, they will claim that it's not speech. And it's not, it's not their fault that their model said that. That's just math. So they need to pick one. And I think If they decide that it is speech, then it's protected, but they're also accountable. If it's not speech, then it's not subject to the First Amendment. And adults can find other arenas to have those conversations with other adults. And some may go to shady websites that are allowing these things to exist, but right now it's a Wild West. And I think we need to start with what we can. But that's a common mistake because of the way these models respond. And we even talk about it when we talk about ChatGPT said to me. ChatGPT didn't say anything. Math spit out, and the outputs of the model, if you look in the code, they're numbers. They're not words. Every word is assigned a number, a token. And so it spits out a series of numbers and then looks them up in a dictionary. And that's not speech foundationally. So I think that is a question we're going to have to reckon with at all levels of government.
Any other questions from our audience? So thank you all so much. I'm going to rejoin the panel up here for a second, just to close out the program. Unfortunately, we are not able to take questions from our Zoom audience, but my email address, amy@sallyharrell.org, should be in that Q&A with the other resources that we provided tonight. So you can always email me your question, and if we can't answer it, Senator Harrell can't answer it, we will send it to one of these expert panelists to help. So we really appreciate everybody's participation tonight. I think this may be the first of several conversations that Senator Harrell hopes to have with the community about this issue. Please do sign up for our advocacy network, our Parents Action Network for this issue, so that we can keep you updated on the work of the study committee and the policies that will be put forward. I want to thank profusely the staff at Dunwoody City Hall for all of their help and support in putting this program together and for working with me on it. And I thank you and good night.
Thank you.